So let's look at the next section of the student experiment. We start by looking at the marking guide. You can see the next section is finding. It's only 3 dot points here. Considered management of risk / ethical / environmental. The critical word here is considered. So let's have a look at this. All right. So you could do this as a table. If you did it as a table, you might want to, thinking about an experiment with chemicals and glassware and things, you could go hazard, which is the thing that could cause harm, in your first column. Then risk in the second column. Risk is how badly could somebody get hurt? Like broken glass could cause lacerations. And then your control measures in the right-hand column. And this is where you want to be a bit detailed in terms of, like say, for example, if you're talking about broken glass, you would say, locate glassware in the centre of the bench. If breakages do occur, sweep up with the dustpan and broom and discard in the glass bin, notify the teacher. That sort of thing. So be somewhat detailed because it's got to be considered management of risk. Now, what do we mean by considered? It means that you're considering all of the major sources of risk. So we're not saying that you have to say there's a risk of the roof of the biology building falling in, because that's really not going to happen. But thinking about all of the hazards associated with the experiment, and don't say that the students need to take care. We've got to be specific control measures. Don't just say personal protective equipment or PPE. You've got to be specific about the type of PPE that's required: safety glasses, lab coat, gloves, and also say if you're using chemicals, be specific about the language you use. For example, hydrogen peroxide is an oxidizing agent, bases are caustic, and acids are corrosive. Now, you also need to consider ethical and or environmental. It really depends on the type of experiment you're doing. But you might be thinking about environmental as disposal of chemicals, or it might be environmental in terms of, thinking about if you're doing an ecological survey, it's about walking on the tracks, not standing on organisms, making sure you take your rubbish away with you, that sort of thing. And then if you're involving humans, then you need to consider ethical as well. Okay, so that is the first part, safety and ethical. The next part is about collection of sufficient and relevant raw data. Now, so we need to, we can just sort of signpost this somewhat by saying that the raw data is in an appendix, and then you can just have your process data here. But look, you can't say it's, you can't just put in an appendix and not signpost it. Given that the numbers in your tables don't count to your word count, you could have your raw data here. It just depends on how much you've got. So this is my raw data here, and it's just a bit unmanageable to go in. So it really depends on how much data you've got, but you must show me. The other thing that I did here is n equals 58. That's showing me how many participants I had, or showing, in the table it's the number of participants, 58 and 58. So that is another way of showing that there is sufficient data. And, okay, so that's the second part. And of course it needs to be relevant data. So, you need to be thinking about your research question. For example, if you're doing an ecological study and you say that, one of your things that you're measuring is an abiotic factor, well, you need to make sure that you're measuring that abiotic factor on every transect line and every quadrat. Otherwise, it's not going to be sufficient. So do think about that. Then the last thing is about fluent and concise use of scientific language and representations. So your scientific language, thinking about doing an ecological survey, this is when you're using the scientific names for the organisms, and you're using the appropriate genre convention that, you name the scientific names correctly, so that they're in italics. The genus name has a capital and the species name starts with a lowercase. And but the other thing is, using scientific mature, so concise, so fluent and concise. We're making a judgment about your whole document in terms of how, how fluently you're communicating. Concise means that you're not being repetitive. Look, one of the things about having a 2,000 word assignment means that you need to ensure that you're concise. And we can talk about that in another video in terms of how, let's actually talk about it now. Okay, so how do you make sure that you get into the word count? Okay, I get students to write the whole thing first and not worry about the word count until the very end, but do give yourself a good couple of days to look at refining it. Wait till you get your draft back from the teacher, because the teacher might say, no, you don't need that section, or hey, don't forget you haven't done this section. Then what I like to do first is that rule. That means that you're going to search up anywhere. So can I just show you what I mean? You're going to go into Command Find, and you're going to type in the word that. Everywhere there's a that, you need to consider, can I get rid of it? And does it still make sense? Now, I've gone through and removed all those that's that I can, so all of these should make sense. To identify significant differences, that may, so we can't get rid of that one. But some of the time you will find that probably about half of your that's you can get rid of. The other one is the. How many times can you get rid of the? See, there's so many these here. There's an opportunity there for you as well. And then you need to, again, be more concise. So look at what you've written, look at the sentence, look at the paragraph, and think about how can I reduce the number of words and still make it meaningful. When you do that, your writing becomes far more concise and fluent, and it's much, much easier to read. So that's worth 5 marks, and there's only the 3 dot points there. So this should be pretty low-hanging fruit for you.